Hey, welcome to Northshore. It's so good to see you. If you're in this room with us, get to your feet. We're going to worship God today. If you're joining us online, we invite you to worship with us too. Let's do this together. Here we go.
When all I see is the battle, you see my victory. When all I see is a mountain, you see a mountain move. And as I walk through the shadow, your love surrounds me. There's nothing to fear now, for I am safe with you.
Come on, let's sing this together.
So when I fight, I'll fight on my knees with my hands lifted high. Oh God, the battle belongs 'cause there's nothing impossible for you.
Come on.
When all I see are the ashes, you see the beauty. Thank you, God. When all I see is a cross, God, you see the empty tomb. So when I fight, I'll fight on my knees with my hands lifted high. Oh God, the battle belongs to you, and every fear I lay at your feet, and I'll sing through the night. Oh God, the battle belongs to you. Almighty fortress, you go before us. Nothing can stand against the power of our God. You shine in the shadows. You win every battle. Nothing can stand against the power of our God. Almighty fortress, you go before us. Nothing can stand against the power of our God. You shine in the shadows. You win every battle. Nothing can stand against the power of our God. Almighty fortress, you go before us. Nothing can stand against the power of our God. You shine in the shadows. You win every battle. Nothing can stand against the power of our God. So when I fight, I'll fight on my knees with my hands lifted high. Oh God, the battle belongs to you, and every fear I lay at your feet, and I'll sing through the night. Oh God, the battle belongs to you. Oh God, the battle belongs to you.
Amen. We are here today to celebrate how good God is, how powerful God is. So no matter where you're coming in from, I invite you to lay down your distractions, to let go of your tiredness, and to focus on Jesus and his love today.
Creation suddenly articulate with 1,000 tongues to lift one cry. Then from north to south and east to west, we'd hear Christ be magnified. Let's sing this together. Were the whole earth echoing his eminence, his name would burst from sea and sky. From rivers to the mountain tops, we'd hear Christ be magnified. I'll stand strong and worship you. And if it puts me in the fire, I'll rejoice 'cause you're there too. I won't be formed by feelings. I'll hold fast to what is true. And if the cross brings transformation, then I'll be crucified with you. 'Cause death is just a doorway into resurrection life. And if I join you in your sufferings, then I'll join you when you rise. And when you return in glory with all the angels and the saints, my heart will still be singing, my soul will be the same. Oh, Christ be magnified, let his praise arise. Christ be magnified in me. Oh, Christ be magnified on the altar of my life. Christ be magnified in me. Sing it, oh, Christ be magnified, let his praise arise. Christ be magnified in me. And oh, Christ be magnified on the altar of my life. Christ be magnified
There was a moment when the lights went out, when death had claimed its victory. The King of Love had given up his life, the darkest day in history. There on the cross they made for sinners. For every curse his blood atoned. One final breath and it was finished. But not the end we could have known. For the earth began to shake, and the veil was torn. What sacrifice was made as the heavens roared. All hail King Jesus. All hail
Hey, so that was kind of a golf clap, and that's okay. Golf claps are okay. But here's why we're here, my friends. And I know we're tired. I know there's stress in our life. I know there's stuff going on. We are here to celebrate the risen Lord of the universe. So we're going to try that clap one more time. Yeah. God deserves our worship. He deserves our presence and our enthusiasm, and He is here to give our hearts exactly what we need today. So no matter where you find yourself, no matter how you're doing, God sees you, He loves you, we love you, and we're so glad you're here. We're going to keep going with our service. Go ahead and take your seats. Let's watch this together.
Every year, almost $1 million goes out these doors to our local and global partners. And we do this because we want people all over the world to experience the life-changing power of Jesus. I want to tell you about a partnership we have with a little church in Los Cedros, Nicaragua. Los Cedros is a rural community in Nicaragua where the average annual income is less than $6,000 a year. This school helps provide a quality biblical education for students in their community. Today, more than 350 students attend, and many have made decisions to follow Jesus. Throughout the past 17 years of our support, hundreds more have been given the hope of a brighter future in Los Cedros. As a church, we will continue to be together for our ministry partners like this for years to come.
There have just been extraordinary things that have continued to happen in places like Nicaragua, and excited to share some of those stories. You know, many of you know that when crisis strikes in the world, Northshore has always done its best to step up and respond. It happened last year with the Afghanistan crisis and the refugees that were coming from there. We were able to team up with someone and help bring some relief in that situation. Of course, recently, many of you know, because you've been part of more than $100,000 that's been given to support those who are currently being displaced because of what's gone on in the Ukraine. But really at the heart of our Together for the World and global initiative has been really teaming up with partners in many countries in different parts of the world. Long-standing relationships, where relationships have been formed, where investment has happened, and we've been able to see extraordinary transformation. I've been here now for a little over a decade, and many of these ministry partnerships predate that. They've been here for a long time. But I've been able to visit many of them, and I'll tell you, it's cool to hear stories about lives that are changed. It's amazing to hear stories about families that have been changed. But very often in these places, entire communities have been transformed. Things are completely different there because of the engagement of the incredible partners there on the ground and the support that's come from Northshore over the years. You know, people always say it's a small world, and that's true, but God is doing big things through the generosity of so many people who call this church home. And so if you give, just know you're part of those life change and those community transformation things that are happening, not just in Nicaragua, but in places like India and the Philippines and Spain, in Nepal, in Haiti, all these different extraordinary places. That's part of who we are, and I just want to say thank you, those of you who give. Because in addition to all the great ministry that happens here on our Kirkland campus and in our region, a percentage of everything that's given goes to help support those partnerships globally and serving in our community as well. So way to go. And if you want to be part of that, you can by either giving at the doors as you're on your way out here on our Kirkland campus, or of course giving there online at northshore.church/give. You can be part of that. Now, before I go any further, let me just say hi. I'm Wolfgang. I work here. And to those of you here on our Kirkland campus, welcome. Good to see you guys. To those joining us online, thank you for being here as well. We love our online community and so glad that you're part of our experience every week as well. And if you're here on campus, in the back of the seat in front of you is one of these green-topped cards, says connection card, or they might be on your seat if you're sitting at the front. And for those online, that QR code there on the screen, you can scan that. And what that is just a chance to communicate with us. Let us know that you're here, let us know if there's a next step you want to take. Let us know if there's anything we can pray for. And sincerely, this list of prayer requests that we receive every week, it goes to our pastoral staff, it goes to some of our prayer team members. Every one of these requests is prayed for. And if you're going through something right now where you'd like some prayer, why would you pass up the chance to do this? So just fill that out and drop it off either in the boxes as you leave, or if you're here for the very first time on our Kirkland campus, take this and drop it at our guest services area. We've got a little gift we'd like to give you just to say thank you for being here. So I hope you'll do that. Now today, we're in for a treat. We've been in a series recently called When in Doubt, where we just believe the church should be the safest place in the world to ask faith questions and explore doubts. And you're in the right place if that's you, because today we're talking about one of the questions almost everyone I know wrestles with, myself included from time to time. And to talk about it, we have one of our favorite guest speakers here at Northshore who'll be introduced in just a second. But before that happens, we want to help you find a next step here to connect and make this place home. And to do that, here's a couple opportunities you'll see on the screen. Check it out.
Well, hey everybody, welcome to Northshore. My name is Becky, and it is so good to be with you today. We have seen time and time again that Jesus can change everything for anyone, and we can't wait to see what God does this morning. There are some really great ways to connect deeper into community here, so we want to share a few of those with you now. Check this out.
We have seen God at work in our church, and as we look to the future, we believe God is stirring our hearts to be a part of a vision bigger than anything we can ask or imagine. A vision that sees countless people throughout the Puget Sound entering into a life-changing relationship with Jesus. At Vision Night, we will share what God has put on our hearts as we look to the future and spend time in worship and prayer. Vision Night is Sunday, May 22nd at 6 p.m., and we'd love to have you be a part of this incredible night.
See what God can do through you this year by being a part of Starting Point. Starting Point is a 4-week experience kicking off on May 10th, where we'll help you find a community, places to serve, and ways for you to grow deeper in your relationship with Jesus. To register, check Starting Point on your connection card or head over to northshore.church/startingpoint.
Summer is coming, and we want you to be a part of creating an epic summer adventure for kids in our community. From July 18th through the 21st, our campus will be transformed to host our N Kids summer adventure called Monumental. We are looking for group leaders, organizers, creatives, and planners to join our team to make this year's summer adventure the best ever. To register your kids and to join the team, head over to northshore.church/kids.
Well, there are so many opportunities to grow in your faith beyond Sundays, so head to northshore.church or follow us on social to find out even more ways to get connected here. And now I get to welcome our guest speaker today. She is one of my favorite pastors of all time. Let's give a huge Northshore welcome to Abby Odio.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks so much. Really good to be back here. Genuinely good. I actually paid Becky $20 to say that, but nonetheless, it felt good. So, just thrilled. Your hospitality, it's always such a gift. If you're new, welcome. We're really glad you're here. If you're joining us online, thanks for being with us. So, Pastor Scotty kicked off this series last week called When in Doubt. And if you were here, you know that the heartbeat of that series is not how we avoid doubt when it comes to our faith, which is hard, if not impossible to do, but rather, how do we navigate seasons of doubt faithfully? In other words, what does it look like to take steps of faith in the midst of doubts that we may carry? And as we continue sort of pressing into that question today, we're going to look at a reality that for most of us, if not all of us, will at some point be what motivates doubts, questions that we carry. And that is the reality of pain and of suffering. Like many of you, a couple weeks ago, my family and I celebrated Easter. We have 2 young sons. Our oldest one's 4, our younger one's 2. And we sat in church, just kind of like y'all are doing right now. And as we worshiped, my younger son leaned over and he said to me, "Mom, what does it mean to be risen?" Because he was hearing that word used a lot in the service. Like a good pastor, I leaned over and I said, "Ask your dad," which was, I didn't actually say that. Curious what he would have said. But I said, it means, buddy, that Jesus was killed on a cross, and then 3 days later we celebrate that he was risen to life, because it means that we can have hope, and we too can have life. And I love 4-year-olds. If you have 4-year-olds, you get it, right? You just never know what's gonna come out of their mouth. And he looked at me and he said, "Okay, Mom, got it, thanks." I was like, job's done here. And then I was feeling pretty good, but we were driving home and I noticed he was kind of quiet in the back seat, and he's never quiet, right, 4. So I said, "Hey, buddy, you doing okay? You feeling okay? What are you thinking about?" And he said, "Mom, did all that really happen to Jesus, or is it just a tall tale?" In our house, we use the language of tall tale instead of lying. It's a little bit softer, right? So he said, "Is that a tall tale?" And I tell that story because his little question hits home for many of us. Is this true? Is this story real? And nothing can surface sort of that doubt, that question so quickly or intensely as times in our life when we suffer. And this is especially true of the kind of suffering we'll look at today. It's not suffering that comes about by poor personal decisions that we may make, which we've all done before, but rather suffering that is undeserved, seems random. There's a man in the Bible named Job, and for Job, this kind of suffering became very real. We're told Job's a guy who's done everything right. He lives with integrity. He avoids evil. In that day, when a person sinned, they would do kind of this strange thing. They would go to the temple and they would offer a sacrifice of atonement. We're told Job was so good that anytime his family had a party, he would go and offer a sacrifice in the name of his children, just in case they'd messed up the night before, like just in case things had gotten out of hand, right? This is like the ultimate helicopter parenting. But you get the idea. He was a good man, right? And some of you know what happens next. Tragedy after senseless tragedy finds Job. He loses his livestock. All of his children die in a freak accident. Job himself develops a terrible and really painful skin disease. And if you read this Old Testament story, you'll see God allows it all to happen to Job. He doesn't cause it. It's a really important thing to clarify. But he doesn't intervene to stop. Job's life was full of goodness and abundance, and in an instant, all of that is taken away. Confusion, chaos, despair. Have you ever been there? Some of you might feel like you're there right now. And it's from this place that Job the exemplary churchgoer, Job the man of great faith, all of a sudden has some questions of his own. He asks God this, he says, "Why have you made me your target?" Amongst other things, but this question really kind of captures it all. Why, God, have you made me your target? In other words, if you are powerful, why this pain? I've done my best to love you and to follow you. Why all of this? And the hard part of Job's story, and the hard part for us, is that God never provides a direct answer to this question of why. That's not to say it's not a valid question. It is. It's not to say it's not a question we should ask and wrestle with. It is. But the richness of Job's story is found not in the philosophical answer to the question of why, but rather in the practical question of how. How do we navigate seasons of suffering faithfully? How do we keep going when we struggle and it seems God is distant and silent? When we've, done the very best we can raising our kids and they've made choices we don't agree with, and we pray and nothing seems to change. When we walk out of the doctor's office with a diagnosis that we didn't see coming. When we pour our very best efforts into a relationship or a marriage and it's just not enough. Where's God? When we turn on the news and witness, kids, 18-month-old babies have become the innocent victims of a war in Ukraine, a war they didn't create. Why, God? See, in these moments, doubt doesn't mean you're a heretic, it means you're human. And the gift of Job's example is that it shows us how to navigate seasons of pain and suffering, not by ignoring our doubt, but by walking through it in such a way that ultimately, like Job, our connection to God, our relationship with God is strengthened. That's where we're going to go today. And As we do that, I want to talk about kind of three things that we see in Job's story. Three ways that Job's doubt, this season of doubt, can be an encouragement to us in our own story. So the first bit of direction that we can take from Job is this: stay in the struggle. Stay in the struggle. The book of Job is a fairly long book. There are 42 chapters, and the first 37 of them largely involve Job praying, lamenting, questioning God. Why is this happening? God, where are you? His friends come around and they offer really bad theology. They think Job must have done something wrong. He must be deserving of this. Think harder, they say. Really kind of scrutinize your life. Ever had a friend like that? Ever been that friend to someone else? Job's friends are fearful of what innocent suffering might imply for their own story, and they project that fear onto Job by peppering him with a host of questions and advice and platitudes. But for 37 chapters, Job stands by his innocence, and I did the math, and 88% of this book is Job's angry, confused, and demanding prayers directed at God. To be clear, it was pastor math, so you might want to double check me on that. But nonetheless, 88% is significant for us. Job doubts, and he stays in the struggle with God. One of the popular books in our home right now is called We're Going on a Bear Hunt. Anyone ever heard of it? A couple of you have opinions about it. I get it. It's a strange picture book about a family, and for fun, they go hunting for a bear, which is odd. But it's a real crowd pleaser, and as they go on this adventure, they encounter all sorts of obstacles. Tall grass, a snowstorm, a dark cave. And throughout the book, there's this refrain that goes, we can't go over it, we can't go under it, oh no, we've got to go through it. A few weeks ago, I read this book to my older son, and he said, no, Mom, they actually have an option they're not thinking of, which is to turn around. He said, that is what I would do because it sounds cold and I don't like being cold. But of course, we know that for Job and in our moments of greatest suffering and doubt, this is not an option, right? Cold or not, Job must find a way through. So the question is, how will he move through? How will we move through? Suffering is one of the few experiences that binds all of humanity. Think about it. No one escapes it, no matter your religion, your socioeconomic status. We will at some point all suffer. And Job doesn't hold back in his conversation with God. He doesn't relent. His words even start to make us uncomfortable. If you read through the book, you'll feel this. It's almost like he's being too honest with God. He says of God, you destroy the hope of mortals. Like that is not something you put on your Pinterest board, right? And if you pay close attention as you read the book, you'll notice Job's friends who step in with all their advice and their platitudes, they have a lot to say about God, but they never speak to God. Job is the only one that stays in the struggle with God. And even as his words make us uncomfortable, they're a sign that he has not lost faith. It's so clear through the text that a deep sense of right and wrong in Job's soul has been violated, of fairness, of justice. We all have that. And just to point it out, this is indicative of a God. It points to a higher moral order. Job knows the world isn't just a bunch of atoms rearranging themselves. There is not just a way things are, there is a way things are supposed to be, a way things were created to be. And Job knows that. It's part of how he mirrors the God who created him. So he continues to speak up and to speak out. And it's Job's ability to do this that ultimately leads him into a deeper intimacy and awareness of God. There's an Old Testament professor named Ellen Davis, and she captures this positive example of Job so well. She writes this: from this book, she's speaking about Job, above all others in Scripture, we learn that the person in pain is a theologian of unique authority. The sufferer who keeps looking for God, in the end, has privileged knowledge. The one who complains to God, rails at God, does not let God off the hook for a minute. They are at last admitted to a mystery. They pass through a door that only pain will open, and thus are qualified to speak of God in a way others, whom we generally call more fortunate, cannot speak. Now, I know I'm driving this point home really hard. Stay in the struggle, and it might seem really straightforward, but when rubber meets the road, when pain ensues and our doubts rise, it can be really difficult to do this. We live in a world where we look for the quickest perceived route out of pain. Harvard came out with a study earlier this year that said binge drinking in the United States is actually up 21% since the start of the pandemic. Friends, this isn't because people are bored. I don't think it's because we're throwing more parties. It's because we're in a struggle and we want a way out of it that's not through it. And instead of prayerfully staying with our honest experience of doubt and of sadness and of pain and of question, we try to go over it or under it or go around it. We try to find alternatives, and we live in a world full of alternatives promising you don't have to be uncomfortable. This is how every addiction begins, as an escape from pain, and every addiction ends with enslavement to pain, right? Excessive drinking, this will get you out of it. Buying stuff we don't need, that'll make you feel better. And we have other ways of avoiding pain as well, acting indifferent or tough enough to get through it on our own. Simple avoidance. So the question for you is this: where are you experiencing pain or doubt? Are you staying in that struggle with God, or are you turning somewhere else instead? What would an honest conversation with God look like today? Hear this: the risk is not that we say the wrong thing to God. God can handle it. The risk is that we stop talking to him altogether. So we stay in the struggle. One of the greatest seasons of pain in my own story happened 7 years ago. One of my dearest friends, I've known her my whole life, called to tell me that her son, who's 4 years old at the time, his name's Justice, had been taken to the hospital by ambulance. He'd been sick with a virus. You know, kids are sick all the time, at least mine are. She didn't really think anything of it. They went to the doctor. The doctor said it's all fine. But a few days later, Justice woke up from a nap and actually passed out right there in their home. They called 911. And this led to a genuine Job moment. 3 months in the hospital. Most of that time, Justice was sedated with swelling in his brain so bad they had to take out a portion of his skull. And similar to Job, no answers. Doctors couldn't even pinpoint which virus has caused this or why. Certainly no word from God on that front. I'll never forget one of my visits to be with them in Portland. The doctor came out and said, you know, you need to know this. We get the sickest kids in the entire state. And your kid is the sickest kid in this hospital. But now, praise God, Justice survived and his life continues to be a profound gift. But his story is very different than it otherwise would have been. He cannot swallow or eat. He communicates love with gestures, but he cannot speak. His movement and sleep is limited by ongoing seizures. He can't walk because of these seizures. It is a miracle that he is here, and it is still so hard. But I have to tell you, there is no one in the world I have greater respect for than his parents, because they stayed in it, and not just with their kid, obviously, but like Job, they wept and they said, "Why not me, God? Take me." And they cried out in pain, and they prayed, and they doubted, and they wouldn't accept platitudes. They stayed in the struggle with God. Now, I'll tell you today, they believe the same things that they believed before Justice got sick, but that theology, it lives in them in a different way. Recently, I was talking to Justice's dad, Jason, about faith, and he made a comment. He said, my faith, it will never be the same after what happened. And I said, do you mean that in a good way or a bad way? He said, I mean that in an honest way. That line has haunted me for a bit as I read Job's story. See, for Job and for Jason and for all of us who choose to stay in the fight, there is a true and real and weathered faith that is forged in us. And to be clear, that doesn't make it worth it, but it does mean that when pain and suffering find us in this fallen world, if we can stay in it, the good news of this story is that there's always hope ahead. That brings us to the second bit of wisdom we see in Job when it comes to navigating that doubt, and that is this: lean in to limitation. Lean into limitation. It's interesting, as we read through Job, when we get to chapter 28, Job launches into this long speech about mining. Now, just to be clear, he's not talking about Bitcoin here. He's talking about like shovel in the ground, mining rubies, gold. whatever it was. He says this, he says, humans thrust their hands into flint, pull up mountains from their roots, cut channels into rocks. Their eyes see everything precious. Now, why does Job kind of start talking about this sort of random topic? Well, in that day, mining was one of the most advanced technologies of the time. And Job is highlighting the depths of human capability. He's saying, on our own, just left to our own devices, there's so much we can do and figure out and know. Just imagine if Job were around today for self-driving cars and Siri bossing us all around, right? But despite all humankind is capable of, despite all we can do, Job essentially says there are still questions that are beyond our best technologies, like the question of why God allows human suffering. In the same chapter, he introduces the notion of wisdom. In biblical language, wisdom is a perspective or a view of the world that sort of holds everything together. And as Job's life seems to be falling apart as he suffers and doubts, he realizes wisdom, knowledge of what holds us together, is actually beyond human understanding. Speaking about wisdom, he says this. He says, humankind doesn't know its value. It isn't found in the land of the living. In other words, we can't find it by digging deep into the earth, nor can Siri answer the question of suffering for us. And this is troubling. It's angering. Why does God not just make such knowledge accessible? Wouldn't it diminish doubt and increase belief? Wouldn't it actually help God's cause to explain a couple things? Now, it's interesting. If we go back to the very first book of the Bible, a book called Genesis, we see that this limitation, it's actually part of God's original design. When God creates the first man and woman, he puts them in the garden. He says, all of this is yours, except I'm giving you this one limitation. Don't eat from this particular tree. Now, why would God do that? This question is literally one that has kept me up at night. It seems so arbitrary. Why not this tree? Why not just give them free reign? Share your all-knowingness. I imagine this is how my kids feel when I tell them they can't watch Disney's Encanto all day, every day. Like, why would you deprive us of something so good? Some of you get it. You've been there. I feel for you. Now, hear me. If this makes you angry and upset, you are in good company. Job felt the same way. But at the end of the day, the reality of our human limitation is actually good news for us. See, God created us in his image, but not as his equals. God created us and said, you are infinitely loved. To the very core of your being, you are loved, but you are not infinitely powerful. And in a way, I imagine the tree in the garden, this particular limitation, when the man and woman looked at it prior to the moment they ate the fruit, it served as an invitation to remember the good news. God is God, and I am not God. I don't know everything, and that fact is what leads me to worship a God who does. There's mystery in it. Now, they did eat the fruit, and suffering and sin enter the story. And we know God delights in neither of those realities. It's important to name that. And we also know that insofar as those realities bring us in greater touch with our own human limitation, they can direct our attention beyond it to a God who is actually other, who's powerful, who we can't fully understand. Think about it. If we could fully understand, if there was no mystery, he wouldn't be worthy of our worship. He would be like us, limited. I know in this room, and those of you listening online, there is no shortage of people who are painfully aware of limitation. I don't mean at all to belittle that pain. Some of you have been victims of, unspeakable acts at the hands of someone whose actions you were not able to control. Some of you long to be parents, but that journey is not going the way you might have hoped, and you're constantly being reminded of limitations. Others might be navigating a deep loneliness or a mental illness like depression or anxiety. I get that. Some of us, just reading the news each day is enough to sort of call it all into question, to wonder, is this a tall tale? See, doubt is so often the result of circumstances that bring us face to face with limitation. It's hard, it's uncomfortable. And we realize, as Job realized, that God is no longer our peer, that there is a mystery that we must embrace as we keep going with God. And while that is really supremely difficult, it's also good news because we know when suffering and pain enter our story, we do not need a peer. We need a God. And in the very hardest moments, we see that wisdom is not knowledge of why, but awareness of who that person is. Who's holding it all together? During Justice's sickness, we embraced the scientific truth that the moon is always round. It became sort of a mantra for us. As you likely know, there are different phases of the moon depending on its proximity to the sun and earth, and all of that changes from where we stand and look. There's a side of the moon that is always dark, never seen. It's mysterious, and yet even in its mystery, we know of its existence. And so this scientific truth, it came to represent this spiritual truth for us that in our painful limitation, God's unchanging nature, it remained present. Did we ask questions like why when it came to Justice being sick? We still ask that. But in reality, there's no answer that would suffice. There's no answer that would please anyone who knows and loves him. But the painful limitation of our knowledge actually brought us into deeper touch with the mystery of God. And oh, how each of us need a God who is beyond us, who's mystery. So that brings us to the final invitation we see in Job's story, which is an invitation to see God anew. An invitation to see God anew in the midst of our doubt. Throughout Job's story, he's been begging and doubting and pleading for God to show up. He demands it, but he continues to be met by silence. And then finally in chapter 38, 88% of the way into this book, just when it seems like God's silence will last forever, God finally speaks. Here's what the text tells us. Then the Lord answered Job from the storm. Now, it would be nice if when God finally made an appearance, he did so with some answers. If he said, here, Job, you've been struggling. This is why all that happened. No need to doubt. But that's not what happens. God shows up in a storm. There is power in this storm, and it is terrifying as storms can be. It's a storm that's beyond Job's ability to control it. And Job actually feared this very thing. If you read the book in chapter 9, when he's demanding that God speak to him, that he show up, he worries that if God does, it'll be too much. He says he'll show up in a storm and he'll crush me. See, Job has realized God is not the God who Job thought he was prior, which was a God who rewarded his good behavior and faithfulness and punished the bad. That God was predictable, logical, controllable. Job liked that God. And now as Job suffers and doubts, he's having to see God anew. And he worries, given all the pain he's gone through, that God is a fear-inducing tyrant, powerful maybe, but cold and distant and uncaring. Ever had that view of God? Does that resonate for you? But I want to focus for a moment on the Hebrew word for Lord that's in chapter 38, verse 1. It says, the Lord answered Job from the storm. See, throughout the Old Testament, there are different words used to speak about God. And up to this point, the most common word we've seen for Lord in the book of Job is Adonai. This is the word that Job most often used. It's a title given to speak about God, and it speaks to a great reverence. It's a word that names the holy, the impersonal distance between two beings, a distance that evokes awe and fear. Adonai speaks of a God who is powerful and Lord over all. But stick with me, this is so important. If we look at Job 38, the moment God appears in the storm with power, the word that is also translated Lord is not Adonai, it's Yahweh. This is the first time the word Yahweh shows up in Job's story. And this matters because Yahweh comes with different connotations than Adonai. Yahweh is the particular name of God given by himself to those whom he exists in relationship with. It's the name he gave to a man called Moses when he called him to act on God's behalf. There's an intimacy and a care and a deep love associated with this name. See, when God shows up in the storm, he does so with power and might that is beyond us and mysterious, and we all need that when we're suffering. But he also shows up as Yahweh, as one who is personal, caring, with us in the midst of our pain. This is not who Job thought God was. He didn't see it coming at all. And it's by staying with God through his suffering and doubt that Job has come to realize the unique nature of God. The thing that sets him apart from every other God that came before him is this: he is near, he is with us, he is in our suffering. He is Adonai, to be sure, but he is also Yahweh. Others would experience this Yahweh God many years later when a man named Jesus claimed to be God. During his time on earth, he healed and restored. He appeared to be in possession of a great and deep power. But then he was crucified. His hands and his feet were nailed to a cross. Not only did he die in that moment, but he took into his life, he felt the unimaginable weight of all the suffering of the world, of Job's suffering, of my suffering, of yours. And everyone who saw that happen, especially his followers, doubted all that they'd come to believe about this man. It looked like evil and pain had won. It must just be a tall tale. And what motivated them to doubt is the belief that struggle and pain means the absence of power. I'm going to say that one more time. What motivated them to doubt is this belief that we hold so often, that struggle and pain means the absence of power. But what they came to realize is the world-altering reality of a God who could love his creation so much, a Yahweh God, that he would use his power to voluntarily suffer with us, to be alongside us in our pain. No one saw that one coming. Jesus' early followers, the same ones who doubted, they were staggered by this. And to offer them assurance in their doubt, when he had risen, Jesus showed some of them the scars on his hands where the nails had been, as if to say, it's really me, it's really me. And reflecting on this, the early followers wrote that maybe, just maybe, Jesus kept his scars not because he couldn't heal them, but because they reflected his love more than unwounded hands ever could. Jesus kept his scars not because he couldn't heal them, but because they reflected his love more than unwounded hands ever could. These scars tell the story of Adonai, of a God who is risen and powerful and making all things new. And in our suffering, we hold on to that promise. But they also tell the story of Yahweh, a God who is near us, with us, who stays with us in the struggle. We will, like Job, see his deep love anew in the midst of pain. That is who this God is. The author and social commentator David Brooks recently navigated just a super difficult season in his life. He went through a very painful and public divorce. He found himself kind of at this low and unexpected place, doubting all that he'd come to understand about the world, doubting that anyone could repair his story. And that doubt actually led this thoughtful, highly skeptical man to find Jesus. That doubt, that awareness of his own limitation, it led him to the cross. He needed a God who had a power beyond him and a love that was near to him. He needed a God of the storm, but he also needed a God with scars. And he found him in the person of Jesus. And here's how he described this experience. He said, the knowledge that we acquire through suffering can be articulated, but it can't really be understood by someone who did not endure the path it took to get there. I will say I did not come out of that pit with empty hands. Life had to beat me up a bit before I was tender enough to be touched. It had to break me a bit before I could be broken open. Suffering opened up the deepest sources of the self and exposed fresh soil for new growth. Hear this, friends. This is the good news promise of life with Jesus. It's not that life will be easy. It's not that your life will be without suffering. It is that your hands will never be empty. You may feel empty and prone to doubt in this moment, but stay in the struggle. I think of my friend Elise, who because of her son's sickness went back to school. She became a gifted nurse practitioner. There is no one I know who is better at showing up for others in their literal or emotional pain. I think of my own struggle with anxiety over my lifetime, and especially the last couple of years. And how I found God not by running from the pain I felt, but by naming it with God, saying, Jesus, in this moment I feel anxious. Thank you that you're in it with me, that you're Yahweh. Has that solved my problem entirely? Do I still have doubts at points? Absolutely. But I've come to know God through it. The load has felt so much lighter. I think of Job, who moved from mere belief in God to a deep and weathered relationship with a God whose love he knew. There's this great verse at the end of Job where he says, I'd heard it with my ears, but now through the struggle, I see you, God. I see you with my own eyes. This is the good news promise of the gospel. How might God meet you through your struggle? Where might Jesus be breaking open and making new? In this moment, in your story, with all the doubt that you carry. Let's pray together. Loving God, we thank you that you are both Adonai and Yahweh. That there truly is no other God like you, who knows and holds all things that we do not know or hold, but also in the name of love was willing to come so near to us. God, pain, suffering, it can feel so isolating. We can feel so alone in it. God, I pray for the person in this room who might be walking through something difficult right now, and my ask is that you would give them the courage and the energy that they need to keep taking another step, keep in conversation with you. God, I ask that you would be good on your promise, be good on your word, that you would show up in a deeply personal and powerful way in their story on this day even. Give them a sense of comfort. Give them a sense of your nearness that is felt, that is real, that is hopeful. God, as you work that transformation in our own hearts, may we be people that come alongside others in their pain. May we be a church, may we be a community. God, that folks in this neighborhood, in this space, in this city would see us and think, man, those people, they live honestly and joyfully and faithfully and with a heart oriented towards justice despite all the difficult things. That is something I want to be a part of. God, what a gift it is to be your people, broken and beautiful as we are. It is a gift to be your children. It's a gift to be your church. Thank you for being with us always. Amen.
You are here, moving in our midst. I worship sing this together. Even when I don't see it, you're working. Even when I don't feel it, you're working. You never stop working. You never stop working. Even when I don't see it, you're working. Even when I don't feel it, you're working. You never stop working. You never stop working. Even when I don't see it, you're working. Even when I don't feel it, you're working. You never stop working. You never stop working. Even when I don't see it, you're working. Even when I don't feel it, you're working. You never stop working. You never stop working. Waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness, my God, that is who you are. You are waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness, my God, that is who you are. That is who you are, yeah. That is who you are. 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 That is who you are.
Such an important conversation, and I'm so glad you've been here for it. And if you'd like to talk with someone or pray with someone, maybe you're in that season where you just need to know there are other people who are willing to stand with you in the fight that you're facing right now. There'll be folks that'll be hanging out on each side of the stage here, and of course, they're online, folks on the chat that would love to pray with you, talk with you, anything we can do to help. So please don't run out of here if you're in that place and you'd like to talk to somebody. Take advantage of those resources. And for the rest of us, before you head out of here, make sure you say hi to 1 or 3 or 28 people, whatever you're in the mood for, but just say hi to at least one person. Introduce yourself if you've not met them yet before you leave. And next week, we'll be continuing in this series, and you might know somebody you want to invite who's wrestling with some of these doubts. It's a great series to invite them to. I hope you'll do that, and we will see you next week. We love you guys. Take care. See you later.